causes of relational suffering between persons. And I am Father Indunil. If you see here, I have the longest name in the Roman I'm coming from Sri Lanka. We have 3 Buddhist monks, I came from Sri Lanka. I have been in Italy for last 13 years. I came as a student to do my master's, and then after my master's I did a doctorate at Pontifical Urbaniana University, and then after the doctorate I started teaching in the same university, and then I have been working at the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue since 2012. So, in a way, our suffering is going to continue, but now, now we are going to find out, discover what are the causes for our suffering. So our first speaker this afternoon is going to be Venerable Dr. Handy Inthisan, Thai of Washington. Venerable Inthisan is President of Thai in Washington, D.C., the oldest Wat in the country, and he is the Secretary General of the Council of Thai Bhikkhus in the United States. He is also one of the King of Thailand's diplomats to the United States. So we will be listening to Thai view of causes of relational suffering between persons. The floor is over to you, Venerable.
Namo Buddhaya. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to see all of you with smile faces. No suffering at all. But we will find out what is the suffering is and how to release, how to get rid of the suffering. I would like to share with you today in the point of view of Buddhism. Actually, Buddha himself, he discovered the way to get rid of the suffering 2,600 years ago under the Bodhi tree. So when we're talking about suffering, means the problem in our life, in this life and next life, if you not liberate yourself or get enlightenment in this life. So we have to come to the samsara again and again and face the suffering. So today I would like to share some sutra, some nikaya, that means the Pali canon said that about the suffering and how to get rid of suffering. In the Samyutta Nikaya 15.5, translated by Bhikkhu Poti from Pali canon, said that Bhikkhus means the monks. This samsara, the cycle of rebirth, is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering, unhindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. For a long time, bhikkhus, you have experienced the death of father, the death of brother, the death of sister, and the death of son, the death of daughter, the loss of relatives and loss of wealth, loss through illness, as you have experienced this, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable. the stream of tears that you have shed is more than the water in the four great oceans. And another sutta, Sutta Nipada 812, just as a drop of water does not cling to a lotus leaf, as water does not cling to the lotus, as a sage does not cling to what is seen or heard or thought. And of course, this is the Buddha word from Sutta Nipada and Samyutta Nikaya, talking about suffering and how to get rid of suffering. The second paragraph is how to get rid of, because of we cling to it, because we crave it. So that's the suffering arises from that. The Buddha teaching, especially I'm from the Theravada tradition, is concerned primarily about one thing, how suffering comes to be and how it is possible to get rid of it. All of the topics in the teaching relate in some way to this concern about suffering. On topics not relate in some way to this concern, the Buddha set aside as not worth consideration. For example, speculative philosophical questions. In my presentation today are divided into 4 parts. The first part considers the 4 Noble Truths, which is the Buddha's teaching about how suffering is general come to be and how to get rid of it. The second part concerns dependent origination, details explanations of the second and third of Noble Truth regarding the origin of suffering and the way to get rid of it. In the third part, relational suffering as much is discussed. Its origin is will in 2 aspects. In terms of the suffering of this pressure and in terms of clinging to someone who is dear. The fourth part then presents the Buddha's simple teaching, the teaching in brief, according to which suffering, including relational suffering between persons, arises insofar as something of the self is add to simple experience of these senses. If we take our experience just as they are and do not add anything of a self to them, we do not experience suffering in any of these forms. The Four Noble Truths, this is the heart of the Buddha teaching. And this is the, I think, universal law discovered by the Buddha. The Buddha's teachings about suffering is contained in the Four Noble Truths. They describe how suffering comes to be, its cause, and how suffering can be gotten rid of. Number 1, the Four Noble Truths of suffering, or in Pali term, dukkha. Suffering in many forms occur in human lives because of the unsatisfactory and changing characters of existence. So this morning, with most venerable Dhammasuri described a little bit about this. So if you have questions, then we will discuss about the changing or impermanence that we mentioned about anicca. Number 2, the noble truth of origins of suffering, the craving in Pali term is the tanha, or desire, or thirst, is the origin of suffering. Now we know where the suffering is and how it's occurred. From the craving, from tanha, the Buddha said, in the Four Noble Truth number 2. And number 3, the noble truth of the end of suffering. Get rid of the craving is to get rid of suffering. Number 4, the noble truth of way leading to the end of suffering. The noble eightfold path is the middle way that leads to the end of suffering. The eightfold path is made up of right speech, right action, right livelihood, morality group. These 3 morality group. And right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration is a concentration group or samadhi or meditation group. Right understanding and right thought is wisdom group. So in 8, divide into 3. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila means morality, Samadhi is concentration, and Panya is wisdom. Suffering is understood by the Buddha to mean the unsatisfactoriness of life in all its many forms. Suffering includes all those things that worry about human being, for example, getting old, becoming sick, dying, experiencing what is not pleasurable, experiencing that end of something pleasurable, and not getting what one desires. It's comprised anxiety, worry, sadness, grief, disappointment, guilt, regret, etc. Suffering comes from the unsatisfactory and changing characters of everything in human experience, everything in sense experience to which we attach bring suffering. This is the first part of the Four Noble Truths. And the second part, dependent origination. Dependent origination in Pali term called Paticca Samuppada or Paticca Samuppada is the Buddha teaching about the condition under which suffering enters the world and the condition under which it is possible to get rid of it. In this way, the teaching is the full explanations of the second and third of the Noble Truths. Dependent origination then can be stated that in terms of 11 sentences about conditions. Number 1, ignorance, avijja, is a condition for mental formation, sankhara. Number 2, mental formations are a condition for consciousness, vijnana. Number 3, consciousness is a condition for name and form, nama rupa, or mind and body. Number 4, name and form are condition for the 6 bases, means the personal or ayatana in Pali term. Number 5, the 6 bases are a condition for impression or contact, phassa. Number 6, impression is a condition for feeling, vedana. Number 7, feeling is a condition for craving, tanha. And number 8, craving is the condition for clinging, upadana. And number 9, clinging is a condition for the process of becoming, bhava. And number 10, becoming is a condition for rebirth, chati. And number 11, rebirth is a condition for old age and death, chara, marana, and so on. Whole repeating circle of suffering continues unless you reach